The world today feels like a river in flood, restless and unstoppable, carrying everything along in its current. Technology surges forward with breathtaking speed. What seemed cutting edge yesterday is obsolete today. Economies shift like sand dunes in a storm, their landscapes redrawn overnight by new policies, trade conflicts, or financial collapses. Societies reshape themselves under the weight of migration, cultural blending, generational clashes, and social movements that rise and fall in what feels like the blink of an eye. The pace of change is no longer measured in decades, but in days. What was certain yesterday may vanish today, and what is true today may be shattered tomorrow. So here is the pressing question. In such a world, what is the force that allows us not only to survive, but to grow? Some may answer with strength, others with intelligence. But strength alone can shatter when the current is too strong, and intelligence alone can falter when the rules of the game change overnight. The power that endures, the one that keeps us afloat, and even lets us ride the waves, is adaptability. Adaptability is not flashy. It rarely draws attention the way brilliance or boldness does. Yet history, nature, and human experience whisper the same truth. Those who bend survive, while those who refuse to move are broken. Picture a tall oak tree and a stalk of bamboo in a violent storm. The oak, proud and rigid, may snap under the weight of fierce winds. The bamboo, thin and pliant, bends low, letting the wind pass, and then rises again once the storm is gone. Which one truly survives? This is the superpower of the 21st century. Not the strength to resist change, but the wisdom to embrace it. And this is not a distant, abstract idea. It touches you right now in this moment. Perhaps you've seen it in your own life. A company you relied on suddenly went bankrupt, forcing you to switch jobs. A technology you mastered became outdated, and suddenly you had to learn new tools. A personal relationship shifted, and you were left with no choice but to adjust to a new rhythm. Each of these moments tests adaptability more than intelligence or brute force. Think of the last 2 decades alone. Social media rose and changed not just how we communicate, but how we think and value ourselves. The world faced a pandemic that altered work, travel, and human connection overnight. Remote work, once a niche possibility, became the lifeline of entire economies. Entire industries disappeared while others bloomed in unexpected places. Artificial intelligence, once science fiction, now sits at the heart of daily decisions. Who can predict what the next 5 years will bring? But amid this uncertainty lies a profound opportunity. If change is inevitable, then adaptability is the bridge between who we are today and who we must become tomorrow. And that is why, in this audiobook, we walk together into the heart of adaptability. Not as a theory, but as a living, breathing skill that shapes every part of life. I want you to pause for a moment and imagine yourself in this great river of change. Where are you? Are you standing on the bank, watching the waters with fear? Are you being swept away, struggling for breath? Or are you learning to swim, discovering that the current can carry you to places you never imagined? This journey is not about becoming the strongest swimmer overnight. It is about learning that you can float, steer, and eventually move with purpose even in turbulent waters. That is the quiet promise of adaptability. And before we move further, let me invite you to reflect in a small way. Comment below where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your world. Your place, your hour, your unique moment. It is part of this shared river. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Audiobook Sanctuary and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ripple in this unfolding story. Because what we are exploring together is not just a skill, It is a way of living that may very well define your future. When we understand that the world is a torrent of change, we naturally arrive at the next question. What exactly does adaptability mean? What is this power that bends without breaking, that survives where others collapse? To uncover that, we must turn now from the flood of change outside us to the hidden force within. Adaptability is a word often tossed around in conversations about success. Yet when you pause and ask yourself, what does it really mean? The answer is far more profound than simple flexibility. Adaptability is not just about adjusting your schedule when plans shift or learning a new software when your company requires it. At its core, adaptability is the capacity to shift your mindset, your actions, and even your identity in response to new circumstances without losing your essence. It is the art of remaining true to your core values while reshaping the way you live them out in a changing environment. Think of it as a dance. The music may change, sometimes softly, sometimes violently. One moment it's a waltz, the next it's a fierce drumbeat. Adaptability is not stubbornly insisting on dancing the same steps, regardless of the rhythm. It is having the awareness to listen, the courage to move differently, and the trust that you will still find beauty in the flow. It is not passive surrender, but an active, mindful choice to engage with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Consider how nature illustrates this so vividly. A chameleon does not mourn the loss of its green skin when the leaves turn brown. It shifts, calmly, seamlessly, ensuring its survival. A river, confronted with a boulder, does not stop in despair. It bends around it, continuing its journey, perhaps slower, perhaps carving new paths, but always moving. Humans, too, are wired with this same potential. But unlike the chameleon or the river, we must choose it consciously. In the modern world, adaptability has become synonymous with resilience, agility, and even innovation. But while resilience often emphasizes endurance and bouncing back, adaptability goes further. It's about transformation. It's not only about recovering from what was lost, but about reshaping into something new, often stronger and wiser. To see this, look no further than the stories of people who thrive in uncertainty. Immigrants stepping into a new culture and learning not just to survive, but to weave their traditions into a new life. Entrepreneurs who pivot when their first ideas fail, discovering that what looked like ruin was actually the path to breakthrough. Artists whose styles evolve with time, keeping them relevant across generations. What do they all share? The willingness to let go of rigid expectations and to grow into the unknown. Of course, adaptability does not mean abandoning everything familiar at the first sign of change. Imagine a tree again, but not one that topples or bends randomly. Instead, think of a tree whose roots sink deep while its branches sway freely. The roots, your values, your identity, your principles, anchor you. The branches, your habits, methods, and strategies, are what must bend, shift, and grow toward the light as seasons change. Without the roots, you would drift. Without the branches, you would wither. Adaptability is the balance between the two. In everyday life, this balance often shows itself in small choices. A parent learning to communicate differently as their child grows. A worker embracing new technologies rather than resisting them. A student adjusting study habits when old methods no longer work. Each choice seems small, yet together they build the muscle of adaptability, the ability to thrive when life refuses to stand still. And here lies the quiet beauty. Adaptability is not only about survival, it is also the key to growth. When you adapt, you are not simply enduring change, you are expanding into it, discovering new dimensions of yourself you never knew existed. Adaptability is the silent power that turns disruption into opportunity, endings into beginnings, and uncertainty into a canvas for creation. Now that we've uncovered what adaptability truly means, the next question becomes unavoidable. Why do some people seem to embrace it naturally, while others resist it with all their might? To answer that, we must contrast the rigid with the flexible, the ones who cling versus the ones who let go. Imagine two individuals standing side by side as the winds of change sweep across their lives. One stiffens his back, clenching his fists, determined to resist at all costs. The other loosens his shoulders, takes a deep breath, and adjusts his stance, ready to move with whatever comes. In that moment, the difference between rigidity and flexibility is revealed, not in strength, but in response. The rigid person often relies on the comfort of certainty. He says to himself, "This is how it has always been, so this is how it must remain." At first, this determination may look like discipline, even courage. But when the storm intensifies, his refusal to bend leaves him vulnerable. Like a dry branch in heavy wind, resistance becomes fragility. The very hardness that once seemed reliable now makes him brittle. Contrast that with the flexible individual. She is not careless, nor does she simply abandon her beliefs at the first sign of difficulty. Instead, she listens to the shifting rhythms around her, acknowledges the change, and asks, "What must I do differently here?" Her openness does not weaken her, it strengthens her. Because she is not trapped in one way of being, she discovers 10 others. Where the rigid person sees only the collapse of the familiar, the flexible person sees the birth of the new. Think of history's turning points. Companies that once dominated their industries but refused to adapt, giants in film photography, physical bookstores, or video rentals, fell almost overnight because they clung to outdated models. Their leaders mistook rigidity for stability. Meanwhile, others who embraced flexibility, those who pivoted toward digital photography, online commerce, or streaming technology, thrived in the very chaos that destroyed their rivals. On a more personal scale, think about the workplace. The rigid worker resents new tools, dreading the discomfort of learning, insisting that the old way was better. He spends more energy resisting than evolving and soon finds himself left behind. The flexible worker, however, dives into the unfamiliar, sometimes fumbling at first, but steadily mastering the new skill. In time, this adaptability not only secures her place, but positions her for growth. Even in relationships, the contrast is clear. The rigid partner insists on holding the same expectations, the same roles, the same responses, year after year, regardless of how life changes. Over time, the relationship suffocates. The flexible partner, on the other hand, evolves with the seasons, shifting communication, adjusting boundaries, discovering new ways of giving and receiving love. This openness keeps the bond alive, nourished by change rather than threatened by it. Psychologically, the rigid mind often comes from fear. The fear of uncertainty, the fear of losing control, the fear of stepping into the unknown. Flexibility, by contrast, is born of trust. Trust in oneself, trust in the ability to learn, trust that even if the ground shifts, one can still find balance. It is not about eliminating fear, but about moving forward despite it. To live rigidly is to see change as an enemy. To live flexibly is to see change as a teacher. Both people will face the same winds, the same storms, the same disruptions. The outcome, however, depends not on the intensity of the storm, but on the willingness to bend without breaking. And here lies the turning point in our exploration. If we can recognize this difference between rigidity and flexibility, then the next step is to identify the signs, the real everyday traits that show when a person has truly developed adaptability. Because it is one thing to admire flexibility in theory, but it is another to notice it in practice, in yourself and in those around you. How can you tell if someone has the gift of adaptability? What are the signals that separate a person merely enduring change from one who is thriving within it? The signs are not always dramatic. Often they appear in the quiet rhythms of daily life, in the subtle ways a person responds when reality refuses to follow the script. The first sign is openness to learning. An adaptable person treats knowledge not as a fixed possession, but as a flowing stream. They are willing to ask questions, to admit ignorance, and to learn from unexpected teachers. You may notice it in the colleague who doesn't panic when a new system is introduced at work, but instead says, "Show me how this works. I want to understand." That openness is not weakness, it is a mark of strength, for it shows the courage to grow. A second sign is emotional flexibility. When plans crumble, some collapse with them, their moods dictated by circumstances. The adaptable individual feels the sting of disappointment, yes, but quickly steadies themselves, asking, "What now?" They do not dwell in despair for long. Their emotions bend like branches in the wind rather than snapping under the weight of frustration. Third, adaptable people demonstrate creativity under pressure. Give them an obstacle, and they will search for a door that others overlooked. They improvise. When a meeting fails, they suggest a new format. When resources are scarce, they find a way to make less become more. Their creativity is not always glamorous. It may be as simple as rethinking a routine, but it reflects a deep willingness to explore possibilities instead of lamenting limitations. Another sign is resilience in relationships. Adaptable people rarely cling to rigid roles or expectations of others. They recognize that people evolve and relationships must evolve too. If a friend grows distant, they do not immediately assume betrayal. They ask instead what has shifted and how they might respond with empathy. If a partner's dreams change, they look for ways to walk alongside rather than dragging the other back to the old path. Adaptable individuals also hold a healthy relationship with failure. Where rigid minds see failure as the end, adaptable minds see it as feedback. They may stumble, but rather than hiding the wound, they examine it. They ask what the experience taught them, and they emerge with adjustments that make them stronger. In their world, mistakes are not shameful. They are stepping stones. A final sign is presence of mind in chaos. Picture a crisis. A flight is canceled, a project collapses, an unexpected bill arrives. While others spiral into panic, the adaptable person takes a breath. They may not know the answer immediately, but they do not allow chaos to rule them. They think clearly, act deliberately, and focus on the next right step rather than drowning in the immensity of the problem. When you begin to notice these signs, openness to learning, emotional flexibility, creativity, relational resilience, comfort with failure, and calm in chaos, you begin to recognize the quiet power of adaptability. These traits rarely shout for attention, but they shape lives in profound ways. They are the difference between a person who survives disruption and one who thrives because of it. And this recognition leads us naturally to a wider horizon. These signs do not belong to humans alone. They are woven into the fabric of life itself. For if we look carefully at the natural world, we find the same lesson echoed again and again. Those who adapt endure, while those who cling to rigidity disappear. Let us turn to nature, our oldest teacher, to see what adaptability looks like across the vast story of life. For millions of years, the Earth has been a stage of constant upheaval. Continents drift, climates shift, species rise and vanish. And within this grand drama of survival, one truth shines with clarity. Those who adapt endure, while those who cling to sameness perish. Nature itself is the greatest storyteller of adaptability, and if we listen carefully, it speaks lessons far older than humankind. Think first of the dinosaurs, majestic, powerful, dominant for over 160 million years. They towered over forests and ruled oceans, yet when the world changed suddenly, they could not bend. An asteroid struck. Climates transformed, and within a geological blink, the giants were gone. Contrast this with a small, seemingly fragile survivor, the crocodile. While the dinosaurs disappeared, crocodiles endured by adapting their diet, their habitats, and their behavior. They remain with us today, silent witnesses to the passage of ages. Or look at the humble cockroach. For more than 300 million years, it has crawled through jungles, deserts, and human homes alike. Its secret? Not strength or intelligence, but adaptability. It eats what is available, hides when threatened, reproduces quickly, and thrives in environments where more specialized creatures fail. We may scorn it, yet in the story of survival, it plays a role that few can match. Consider, too, the wolf, ancestor of the modern dog. Wolves adapted to countless terrains, hunting strategies, and climates. But it was the branch of their family willing to adjust to humans, to trade wild independence for companionship, that unlocked a new future. The dog, by adapting to human society, became one of the most successful species on Earth. Its flexibility did not weaken it. It secured its survival in a way wolves alone could never have achieved. Even plants whisper this lesson. The cactus, born in dry deserts, developed thick skins and water-storing tissues, turning scarcity into strength. The dandelion spreads its seeds with the wind, settling in cracks of concrete as easily as in fertile soil. These are not just survival strategies. They are testimonies to the power of flexibility. If we step back, we realize adaptability is not an exception in nature. It is the rule. Life itself is a story of adaptation. Evolution is simply adaptability written across centuries. Each organism that exists today is here because its ancestors learned to shift, bend, and adjust to the unexpected. Those that could not, no matter how mighty, became fossils. And what of us, humans? We too owe our existence to adaptability. Our ancestors walked out of Africa, adjusting to ice, deserts, mountains, and seas. They learned to hunt, to farm, to build, to navigate stars. Each step required leaving behind what was comfortable to face what was unknown. Without adaptability, there would be no humanity. This lesson from nature is both humbling and empowering. Humbling, because it shows we are not exempt from the laws of life. Empowering, because it proves that adaptability is already within us. Just as the river bends, just as the chameleon changes, just as the dandelion spreads, so can we. Now, having seen this wisdom mirrored in the natural world, we are faced with a challenge. How do we cultivate this same adaptability in ourselves, consciously, deliberately, as individuals living in the storm of the 21st century? The answer begins with the most fundamental of tools, the way we see. Adaptability starts with perspective, with the courage to shift the lens through which we interpret reality. Adaptability begins in the mind, and the first tool in building it is the willingness to shift perspective. How you see the world shapes how you respond to it. Two people can face the same disruption, say, losing a job, and walk away with entirely different futures. One sees only the collapse of stability, a dead end. The other sees the same event as a doorway, painful yet filled with possibility. The external event is identical. The difference lies in perspective. This is the foundation of adaptability. Not what happens to you, but how you choose to interpret it. If you frame change as disaster, you shrink from it. If you frame change as opportunity, you lean into it. Perspective is the lens, and by adjusting the lens, you alter the entire picture of your life. Throughout history, great innovators have been masters of perspective. Thomas Edison, after countless failed experiments, refused to see them as failures. Instead, he reframed them. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. His shift in perspective turned frustration into fuel. Similarly, when Nelson Mandela endured years in prison, he might have viewed himself as broken, a victim of injustice. Instead, he chose the perspective of preparation, seeing each year as shaping him into the leader who could heal his nation. That perspective made all the difference. But perspective is not only for extraordinary figures. It is for you, here and now. When plans crumble, ask yourself, is this a wall, or is it a turn in the path? When opportunities vanish, try asking, what is opening in its place? When routines are disrupted, experiment with the thought, perhaps this interruption is the very thing I need to grow. Such questions do not deny the pain of change, but they transform it. Changing perspective requires humility. It means admitting that your first reaction may not be the whole truth. It demands curiosity, the willingness to consider other angles, other interpretations, and it calls for courage, for it is easier to cling to despair than to hold open the possibility of renewal. One practical way to practice perspective shifting is through reflection. Keep a journal not just of events, but of interpretations. Write what happened, then write 3 possible ways to view it. 1 negative, 1 neutral, 1 hopeful. Over time, you will notice how your mind begins to stretch, to see beyond the obvious. What once looked like the end will begin to look like a bend in the road. Another practice is to deliberately seek out contrasting voices. Speak with people whose backgrounds, beliefs, or professions differ from yours. Listen to how they interpret the same world you inhabit. Often, their lens will reveal possibilities you never considered. Adaptability thrives on multiple viewpoints. Rigidity starves on a single one. Perspective shifting does not mean false optimism. It is not pretending everything is good when it is not. Rather, it is choosing to hold the whole picture, to acknowledge hardship while also seeking hidden openings. It is the art of seeing not only what is lost, but also what might be gained. And when you cultivate this skill, you begin to notice how every challenge carries within it the seed of transformation. You begin to trust that what looks like chaos may contain order not yet visible, that what feels like breaking may be the start of becoming. This is how adaptability takes root, in the mind's ability to shift the story it tells itself. From here, the journey deepens. Perspective is the doorway, but once opened, it must be walked through. The next step in cultivating adaptability is to commit yourself to continuous learning, to feed the mind and spirit with new knowledge, so that you are always ready for whatever the world brings next. Once the mind has learned to shift perspective, the next tool for cultivating adaptability is continuous learning. In a world that reinvents itself every few years, the willingness to remain a student becomes not just a virtue, but a necessity. The moment you stop learning is the moment you begin to fall behind, because the ground beneath you does not wait. Consider how quickly knowledge now doubles. What took centuries to accumulate in the past now expands in months. Entire industries rise and collapse in the span of a decade. The careers of the future are being born today, many of them in fields that did not even exist 10 years ago. Artificial intelligence, renewable energy, virtual reality, biotechnology. These are not distant concepts. They are the tools shaping the lives of your children. To thrive in such an age, you must keep learning, not to chase every trend, but to remain supple, ready, awake. Continuous learning is not only about formal education. In fact, the most adaptable people are those who understand that learning belongs everywhere. A child teaches you patience. A new hobby teaches you humility. A stranger's story teaches you empathy. Books, courses, conversations, failures. Each becomes a classroom when you approach life with the spirit of a student. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, whose insatiable curiosity led him to study anatomy, engineering, painting, and astronomy. His genius was not born of narrow specialization, but of endless learning across disciplines. Or consider modern entrepreneurs who reinvent themselves multiple times, moving from one industry to another because they remain students even after success. Their adaptability rests on a foundation of lifelong curiosity. But continuous learning also requires unlearning. Old habits, once useful, can become barriers. A software engineer who insists on outdated programming languages, a manager who clings to old hierarchies, a thinker who refuses to question inherited assumptions, all risk becoming fossils in a living world. Adaptability means holding knowledge lightly, ready to let go when it no longer serves. Practically, you can cultivate this by setting rhythms of learning. Read daily, even if only a few pages. Seek new skills every year, even outside your career. Learn a language, an instrument, or a craft. Engage with communities where fresh ideas flow. And when life itself offers a harsh lesson through failure or disappointment, treat it as tuition paid for wisdom gained. Continuous learning is also an act of humility. It is admitting that no matter how much you know, there is always more to discover. It is resisting the temptation to become an expert who has stopped listening. The adaptable mind says, "Teach me," again and again. And here is the deeper reward. The more you learn, the less you fear change. Knowledge gives you confidence that even if the rules shift, you can understand them. Skills give you trust that even if one door closes, another can be built. Curiosity gives you joy, turning change from a threat into an adventure. This is why adaptability is inseparable from lifelong learning. The two feed each other. To adapt, you must learn. To learn, you must adapt. Together, they create a mind that is agile, resilient, and always expanding. But even with knowledge and perspective, adaptability requires another ingredient: the courage to act, even when action leads to mistakes. Because no amount of learning matters if you never risk stepping into the unknown. And that is where the next lesson awaits. The power of embracing trial and error. Knowledge, perspective, and curiosity are powerful, but they remain dormant without action. Adaptability is not tested in theory. It is forged in practice, in the messy reality of trying, failing, and trying again. That is why embracing trial and error is not just useful, but essential. Mistakes are not signs of weakness. They are the raw material of growth. Think of a child learning to walk. No one expects perfection. The child stumbles, falls, rises, and stumbles again. Each fall strengthens balance. Each attempt refines movement. Failure is not an obstacle to walking. It is the very path to walking. Yet as adults, many of us forget this truth. We become so afraid of failure that we avoid risk, clinging to the illusion of safety. But in doing so, we deny ourselves the very process through which adaptability grows. History is filled with figures who embraced trial and error as the doorway to discovery. The Wright brothers failed repeatedly before lifting their fragile plane into the sky. Each broken prototype was not wasted effort, but a lesson that propelled them forward. Innovators in every field, from medicine to technology, have walked through the same doorway. Failure, embraced with curiosity, becomes instruction. Avoided out of fear, it becomes prison. Even in daily life, the principle is the same. The adaptable worker volunteers for projects outside their comfort zone. Knowing mistakes are part of the journey. The adaptable parent experiments with new approaches when old ones no longer reach their child. The adaptable friend tries new ways to reconnect when distance grows. In every arena, trial and error is not recklessness. It is courageous learning in motion. But how do you actually embrace this practice without drowning in discouragement? It begins with reframing failure. Instead of asking, "What went wrong?" alone, also ask, "What did I learn?" Instead of measuring success only by outcomes, measure it by growth, by the insights gained, by the resilience built. A failed attempt is still progress if it leaves you wiser, stronger, and more prepared for the next. It also helps to set smaller experiments. Rather than betting everything on one colossal leap, take steady steps. Test an idea. Adjust. Test again. Like a scientist in a lab, treat each attempt as data. In this way, the sting of failure lessens, because each result, even the negative ones, has value. And remember, the willingness to make mistakes requires self-compassion. Too often, people punish themselves more harshly than the world ever would. But adaptability flourishes when you allow yourself grace, when you say, "I am learning, I am becoming." With that mindset, even the most painful failures can transform into stepping stones toward resilience. At its heart, trial and error teaches humility and courage. The humility to accept that you don't know everything, and the courage to act anyway. Together, they form the soil in which adaptability takes root and blossoms. And yet, there is one more ingredient without which adaptability falters. In the chaos of trial and error, in the storms of constant change, it is easy to become overwhelmed. To truly adapt, you must carry within yourself a stillness, a center that holds steady when everything else shakes. This leads us to the next essential tool, the power of calm in the storm. Picture a storm at sea. Waves rise like walls, the wind howls, the sky is dark with uncertainty. In such a moment, what keeps a sailor alive is not frantic thrashing, but calm focus. Panic leads to reckless choices, but composure allows the sailor to read the waves, adjust the sails, and guide the vessel through chaos. This image captures the essence of adaptability's next pillar, the power of calm in the storm. Adaptability does not mean you never feel fear or stress. It means you refuse to let those emotions dictate your every move. Calmness is not denial of reality. It is clarity in the midst of it. It is the still center that allows you to think, to choose, and to act wisely even when the world around you is unraveling. We saw this in recent years when global crises disrupted every routine. Some responded with panic, rushing into decisions that deepened their troubles. Others, though equally uncertain, took a breath. They slowed down, observed, and then responded with deliberate steps. Their calm did not erase the storm, but it gave them the ability to navigate it. Consider the wisdom of great leaders. Winston Churchill, in the darkest days of war, projected calm even when danger pressed close. His steadiness gave strength to millions who otherwise might have surrendered to despair. Or think of astronauts in space, where a single mistake can mean disaster. They train endlessly not only in technical skills, but in remaining composed under pressure, because calmness can mean the difference between catastrophe and survival. But calm is not reserved for leaders and astronauts. It is just as vital in ordinary lives. A parent whose child faces a medical emergency must steady their emotions to act effectively. A worker who receives unexpected bad news must hold composure to choose wisely rather than lash out. A friend comforting another must remain grounded to offer presence instead of panic. In all these moments, calmness is a superpower disguised as stillness. Cultivating calm begins with the body. Simple acts, slowing your breathing, relaxing your muscles, pausing before speaking, signal to your nervous system that danger is not absolute. The body listens and the mind follows. From there, calm expands into mindset, reminding yourself that storms pass, that not every threat is final, that one step at a time is enough. Practices like meditation, prayer, or even mindful silence strengthen this calm. They train the mind to return to stillness even when chaos demands frenzy. Over time, calm becomes less of a technique and more of a way of being, an anchor you carry wherever you go. And here lies the paradox. Calm does not make you passive. On the contrary, it empowers action. In a storm, the frantic sailor is paralyzed by fear. But the calm sailor adjusts sails, steers the wheel, and makes progress. Calmness is not inaction. It is the foundation for the right action. When calm becomes part of your adaptability, you discover that no storm can fully control you. You may be tossed, but you are not destroyed. You may bend, but you do not break. With this stillness at the core, you are ready to extend adaptability outward, to inspire and guide others. Because adaptability is not only personal, it is also the mark of great leadership. To see this truth, we now turn to how adaptability transforms those who lead. Leadership in the 21st century is no longer defined by rigid authority or the ability to dictate commands from above. The world has grown too complex, too fast, too unpredictable for that. True leaders are no longer the ones who stand unmoved in the storm. They are the ones who move with it, guiding others by example, showing that flexibility is not weakness, but strength. Adaptability has become the heartbeat of modern leadership. Think of a leader in a business setting. The rigid manager insists that things must be done exactly as they always have been. At first, their team may follow, but soon cracks appear. New technologies arrive, customer needs shift, unexpected crises emerge. The manager who refuses to adapt quickly loses the trust of their people. Their rigidity becomes a cage, trapping both themselves and those they lead. Now picture a leader who embodies adaptability. They do not panic in the face of change. Instead, they acknowledge it openly, invite their team into dialogue, and explore new paths together. They are willing to experiment, to admit when something doesn't work, and to pivot quickly when it's clear that a new direction is needed. Their flexibility creates trust, because people see that this leader is not hiding from reality, but facing it with courage. History offers powerful examples. During the financial crisis of 2008, some leaders clung desperately to outdated strategies, only to watch their companies crumble. Others adapted, shifting resources, reinventing services, listening to their employees' ideas, and not only survived, but emerged stronger. Adaptability turned crisis into opportunity. But leadership is not limited to corporate boardrooms or governments. Parents are leaders within families. Teachers are leaders within classrooms. Friends become leaders when others look to them in times of need. In each of these spaces, the ability to adapt shapes outcomes. A parent who can shift parenting styles as their child grows maintains connection and guidance. A teacher who adapts to different learning needs inspires every student. A friend who adjusts their support based on what the other truly needs sustains relationships that endure hardship. Adaptable leadership has three key qualities. First, it is rooted in listening. Leaders who adapt pay attention, not only to external changes, but to the voices of the people around them. Second, it is humble. Adaptable leaders do not pretend to know everything. They model learning, showing that growth is ongoing. Third, it is courageous. To pivot in front of others requires vulnerability, the willingness to admit when the old way no longer works. And here is the remarkable effect. When leaders model adaptability, they give permission for others to do the same. A team led by a flexible leader becomes innovative. A family guided by adaptable parents becomes resilient. A community inspired by adaptable leadership becomes capable of weathering storms together. In this way, adaptability in leadership is not only about survival, it is about multiplying strength. One flexible leader can ripple outward, creating networks of resilience that transform entire groups. With this vision in mind, let us carry adaptability from the realm of leadership into the realm of work itself. Because in the shifting landscape of the 21st century, careers are no longer built on stability, but on the ability to pivot, evolve, and reinvent. The landscape of work today looks nothing like it did just a generation ago. Once, people could expect to train for a profession in their youth, settle into a single job, and remain there until retirement. That world has largely dissolved. Careers now are fluid. Industries rise and fall in decades, and job descriptions evolve as fast as technology itself. In this environment, adaptability in work is not optional. It is the very condition for survival and success. Consider the changes already in motion. Automation has reshaped manufacturing. Artificial intelligence is transforming everything from customer service to medical research. Remote work has untethered millions from physical offices, creating opportunities and challenges that would have been unthinkable not long ago. Workers who cling to the old ways, insisting that jobs must remain as they were, face growing irrelevance. But those who pivot, learn, and adjust discover that even disruption can open doors. Take the story of professionals who reinvented themselves when industries collapsed. A newspaper editor, once faced with shrinking print circulation, learned digital content strategies and became a leader in online publishing. A travel agent, displaced by self-service booking platforms, turned to personal branding and crafted niche experiences that no algorithm could replicate. These examples reveal a truth. Adaptability transforms endings into beginnings. At the heart of adaptability in work is skill fluidity. The rigid worker defines themselves narrowly. I am only this. The adaptable worker defines themselves broadly. I can learn what is needed. I can grow into what the future requires. This mindset creates resilience, because even when one role vanishes, the person remains employable, valuable, and ready for the next. Adaptability at work also requires emotional intelligence. Teams are now diverse, spanning cultures, generations, and even continents. Misunderstandings are inevitable. The adaptable worker listens, empathizes, and shifts their communication style, bridging differences rather than clinging to one rigid way of interacting. In doing so, they not only preserve harmony, but also unlock creativity, born of diversity. Another dimension is embracing continuous change as normal. In workplaces where systems, tools, and expectations evolve constantly, the adaptable worker does not resist every update as an annoyance. Instead, they approach it with curiosity. What can this make possible? How might this improve our work? That mindset, more than technical skill alone, makes them invaluable to employers. And adaptability is not limited to responding to change. It also means anticipating it. The most adaptable workers scan the horizon, notice early signs of disruption, and prepare before others are forced to. They upskill in advance, network beyond immediate needs, and treat uncertainty as preparation rather than crisis. The reward of adaptability in work is not just survival, but flourishing. Those who adapt find opportunities others overlook. They craft careers that evolve alongside the world, discovering new passions and strengths along the way. They are not chained to a single path. They are free to travel many. Yet, work is only one sphere of life. To be truly adaptable, this flexibility must extend into our personal connections as well. Because just as industries transform, so too do the relationships that weave meaning into our lives. And so we turn next to adaptability in relationships, the quiet art of evolving with one another across the seasons of time. Relationships, like living organisms, are constantly changing. People evolve, circumstances shift, and seasons of life bring new joys and new burdens. To keep a relationship alive, whether it is with a partner, a friend, a colleague, or even a family member, requires adaptability. Without it, connections wither under the weight of unmet expectations. With it, relationships not only survive, but deepen. Think of a long marriage. At its beginning, two people may be bound by youthful passion and shared dreams. But as years pass, jobs change, health shifts, children grow, and personal identities transform. A rigid couple insists on holding to the old patterns, expecting the same routines, the same roles, the same expressions of love that worked decades ago. Slowly, they drift apart, not because love disappeared, but because they refuse to adapt. In contrast, couples who remain flexible adjust as life unfolds. They learn new languages of affection, renegotiate responsibilities, and rediscover one another again and again. Their bond matures, becoming resilient precisely because it adapts. Friendships tell the same story. Two friends may be inseparable in youth, yet life may scatter them across cities or continents. Rigid friendships collapse under the distance, clinging to the idea that connection must look the same. Adaptable friendships, however, transform, shifting from daily presence to occasional calls, from shared activities to deep conversations when time allows. They bend with the demands of life, and because of that, they endure. Even in workplaces, adaptability defines relationships. A manager who insists on one style of communication risks alienating a diverse team. An adaptable manager learns to speak in ways that resonate differently with each person. Direct with some, gentle with others, collaborative with all. Flexibility builds trust, while rigidity breeds resentment. Adaptability in relationships also requires letting go of fixed expectations. People change, and to hold them captive to who they once were is to smother them. A child who grows into independence, a partner who discovers new passions, a friend who changes beliefs, all are natural evolutions. The adaptable person makes room for these transformations, offering support rather than resistance. This openness not only preserves relationships, but strengthens them, because it communicates a deeper love. I value you not only for who you were, but for who you are becoming. Of course, adaptability in relationships does not mean endless compromise or losing yourself to please others. Just as trees bend in storms yet remain rooted, so too must people remain anchored in values and boundaries. Adaptability is not surrender. It is balance, the ability to adjust while staying true to your essence. Practical expressions of adaptability in relationships include listening before reacting, experimenting with new ways of spending time together, being willing to apologize when old habits no longer serve, and celebrating the growth of others, even when it shifts the dynamic. Each small act communicates flexibility, and together they weave resilience into the fabric of connection. When we adapt in relationships, we discover something profound. Love itself is a form of adaptability. To love someone is to continually choose them in new circumstances, to meet them again and again as they change. Adaptability, then, is not separate from love. It is one of its purest expressions. And just as we see adaptability enriching leadership, work, and relationships, we can see it most vividly in the lives of those who faced hardship and emerged stronger because they chose to adapt. Their stories illuminate how adaptability transforms not only survival, but destiny. Stories of resilience bring adaptability to life. They show us that this is not an abstract concept, but a living force that transforms ordinary people in extraordinary ways. Each story becomes a mirror, reflecting back to us the possibility of our own growth when faced with upheaval. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling before she became the world-renowned author of Harry Potter. She was a single mother, jobless, and struggling with depression. Many would have collapsed under the weight of rejection. She received dozens of them from publishers. Yet she adapted. She rewrote, refined, and persisted, using every no as a stepping stone. Her adaptability turned hardship into triumph, shaping not only her destiny, but the imaginations of millions. Or think of Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years in prison. The rigid path would have been to emerge bitter, consumed by vengeance. Instead, he adapted his vision, embracing reconciliation over revenge. His ability to shift perspective and strategy allowed him to lead South Africa into a new era. His resilience was not the absence of suffering, but the transformation of it. In business, look at Howard Schultz, who grew up in poverty in Brooklyn. When he encountered the Italian cafe culture, he saw not a mere difference in coffee habits, but an opportunity to reinvent how America experienced coffee. Starbucks became a global phenomenon, not because he copied the past, but because he adapted an old idea into a new context. Stories of resilience also exist in quieter forms. A mother whose child is born with special needs learns new ways to nurture, advocate, and celebrate milestones others take for granted. A worker who loses his job in midlife retrains in an entirely new field and discovers talents he never knew he had. A community devastated by disaster rebuilds, not in the same way as before, but stronger, wiser, and more united. What unites all these stories is not an absence of failure or pain, but the refusal to remain rigid. Each person chose to bend rather than break, to see new paths rather than mourn the old. Their adaptability did not erase suffering, but it transformed it into growth, into vision, into strength. When we listen to these stories, we are reminded that adaptability is not the privilege of the extraordinary. It is the heritage of the human spirit. Each of us carries the same seed of resilience, waiting for the moment when life demands it. The only question is whether we will choose to water that seed or let it wither. And as we gather these stories, as we trace the lessons of history, nature, and personal lives, the path becomes clear. The future will not belong to the strongest, nor to the most intelligent in the old sense. It will belong to those willing to adapt, to those who can bend like bamboo, shift like rivers, and rise again like seeds carried by the wind. This leads us to our final reflection: the truth that the future belongs to the flexible. The truth becomes unmistakable when we gather the lessons of history, nature, work, and human resilience. The future does not belong to the rigid, nor even to the strongest in the old sense of power. It belongs to the flexible. Strength without adaptability is brittle. Intelligence without adaptability is outdated, but flexibility breathes life into both, turning them into tools for the future rather than relics of the past. Picture the centuries ahead. Technology will not slow, it will accelerate. Economies will rise and collapse faster than in any previous age. Global challenges, climate change, migration, pandemics will test the endurance of entire civilizations. In such a landscape, those who cling to the way things were will find themselves crushed beneath the weight of change. But those who lean into transformation, who pivot, who evolve, will find paths where others see dead ends. The flexible are not defined by a single identity. They carry many roles, many possibilities, ready to shift as the moment requires. They do not fear letting go of what no longer works, because they trust their ability to shape what comes next. This trust is their superpower. It frees them to explore, to risk, to create. Think of the reed in the wind. When storms rage, the stiff tree breaks, but the reed bows low and rises again. In every culture, in every time, this image has carried wisdom. Survival is not in resisting the storm, but in learning how to bend. In the 21st century, this ancient truth has never been more urgent. Flexibility also brings freedom. The rigid person feels trapped when reality changes because their identity is tied to things remaining the same. The flexible person, however, feels possibility because their identity rests not in what is unchanging, but in their ability to change. They see life not as a fixed script, but as a canvas constantly being rewritten. To embrace adaptability is to embrace life itself. Every breath is change. Every day is a shift. Seasons remind us, bodies remind us, history reminds us, nothing stands still. And so the wisest choice is not to deny this truth, but to live in harmony with it. As we conclude this journey, let the final reflection be clear. Success in the coming years will not be about who knows the most or who holds the most. It will be about who can let go, who can learn again, who can step forward even when the ground is shifting. The future belongs to the flexible because only they can dance with change instead of fighting it. Adaptability is not just another skill to be added to a resume. It is the foundation upon which survival and growth are built. It is the art of remaining rooted in values while allowing branches to stretch toward new light. It is the courage to stumble, to fail, to learn, and to rise again. It is the calm center in the storm and the curiosity that drives us to keep walking into the unknown. In the 21st century, adaptability is the silent measure of greatness. Success will not come to those who try to predict every twist, but to those who can pivot when the unexpected arrives. It will not come to those who cling to the familiar, but to those who dare to step into uncertainty with open eyes and willing hands. Adaptability is not about having every answer. It is about trusting that you can find a way no matter the question. Think of the challenges that lie ahead. Entire industries may vanish. The climate may demand new ways of living. Relationships may be tested by distance, by change, by shifting identities. In all of these, adaptability will be the difference between despair and resilience. Where others see endings, the adaptable will see beginnings. Where others collapse, the adaptable will bend, learn, and rise stronger. And here lies the beauty. Adaptability is not reserved for a select few. It is within you already. It is the same instinct that helped your ancestors survive, the same spark that carried you through every past challenge. Each time you adjusted to a new school, a new job, a new season of life, you were practicing adaptability. Each time you chose to learn rather than retreat, to bend rather than break, you were living it. The invitation now is to embrace it more consciously, to see every disruption not as punishment, but as training, to view uncertainty not as a void, but as a space for creation, to treat adaptability not as something you sometimes use, but as the very rhythm of your life. So the next time change comes, and it will, remember this truth. You are not powerless. You have within you the ability to shift, to grow, to find new ways forward. This is your superpower, quiet yet unshakable. In the end, adaptability is more than survival. It is transformation. It turns challenges into teachers, failures into stepping stones, and endings into beginnings. It is the quality that allows you not just to endure the 21st century, but to flourish in it. So step into the river of change with courage. Let the current teach you, shape you, carry you. Do not fear the storm. Become the reed that bends and rises again. For in the endless flow of the world, one truth will remain. In the river of life, the most adaptable will be the most enduring.